I've just thoroughly enjoyed all of this. So I wanted to thank you, Matthew, for making this what could have been quite overwhelming for me as a project. You really did make it wonderful. That just with all of our interactions, with all of our disagreements and seeing things a bit differently, you've been wonderful to work with.
Jay, thank you. We've hardly disagreed much, man. To be honest, it's not been that much disagreement, but it's been really fun for me, and I think we've got a bit more relaxed as time's gone on. I've probably relaxed a bit. Probably the later ones will probably get more and more casual. Um, but
I think I relaxed a bit and realized the importance and the weight of your words. I think there was more balance in that regard as well.
Thanks, James. I've
Yeah.
really it's been great, and I really thank you. You know, the fact that you had all these lessons, confessions, thoughts organized has given it a structure
Mm.
um, that hopefully has guided people. Certainly, when I've been listening to it, it's great. You've really covered so much because I could just kind of, ramble on, but you provided a structure and a kind of methodology and a lot of humor and thought and imagination and titles and all that stuff. So it's been fantastic. I love all
I
the
would.
titles you've come up
I
with.
appreciate it. The only thing I would say is you don't ramble on nearly as much as you riff, and for that I'm appreciative. Well, our topic,
Hmm.
and this is near the end for me. I've got a couple of these, and that's it. This lesson is why do people stay in cults? Why do people stay in cults? I did a fair bit of research on this. And by the way, I realized up front that word is a trigger word, isn't it? I mean, that word by itself is enough to throw us in a tailspin if we're not ready for it. It is. It was for me for a lot of years. Don't get caught up on that word cult. And this is not about the research I did was not about the ICOC or the ICC. This was all cults. But don't get caught up. Somebody says, and for years I'd say, I don't think it was a cult. I think it was cult like. That's what I said until I heard enough stories of others. And I said, okay, I think it's a cult. And the way they have responded to their mistakes, to their sins, the way they have responded with silence, no apologies to be offered. That's also convinced me more. Whoa, whoa, whoa. That's cult. So here are some of the reasons. I'm really curious. We've never discussed this, by the way, Matthew and myself. Curious to get your thoughts on each one of these.
Okay.
Now, the research I found, believe me, it blew me away when the first statement said people get something from this group, even if the negatives outweigh the positives. That right there blew my mind. Because in my life, I will share people, if they heard all of our lessons, about the time that the first time I really seriously realized I'm in something that's not as pure as I thought, and I don't like it. And it was Tanya's first Bible Talk leaders meeting with Kip on a Wednesday night after church. And I'm giving you the condensed version here. One woman got lambasted for not having visitors at her Bible Talk on the campus where she was attending school but not paid by the church. She was just a student Bible Talk leader. Lambasted. And then that was the same one where Kip said, some of you are not coming up to me after the sermons and saying I did a great job. I expect every one of you to be doing that. And trust me, I know which ones of you do and which ones of you don't. And I was so ashamed that Tanya, my new girlfriend, that this was her first time to hear the behind the scenes of leadership. And it was the first time I felt some shame. It was the first time that I wondered, am I doing the right thing here? And I remember that night thinking about it all and coming up with this. I still think that the positives far outweigh the negatives. That's where I was. For the first time, when it hit me hard, I came to the realization I wasn't going to walk away because the positives did outweigh the negatives. They're not even saying that here. They're saying that people will want to stay in even if the negatives outweigh the positives. So I don't. That by itself is a little strange for me. Well, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I'd like to ask you, what were the positives at that time? At that time with yourself and
Oh, it's a
Tanya.
great question. Community, friends that were closer than seemingly my high school friends or college buddies. A purpose. My gosh, are you kidding me? I just found out my whole reason for being born. I've got a purpose. I'm a part of something so much bigger than I am. Ever. Those are mainly the things.
So I think for me, and this is going to sound very very self-righteous or super spiritual. It was always the biggest thing, the only thing really that kept me in the church uh, was God. Was I thought this is where God wanted me to be. This is where I could have a relationship with God. This is the only place I can have a relationship with God, I guess, because this is if I leave this, then I'm sort of leaving God. And those other things, the purpose and the community, uh, they were sort of they were there to a degree, but they were kind of secondary. Um, and there were the community was problematic. I had a pretty unhappy time, so I was unhappy pretty much. I mean, it's funny. I say I was unhappy. I've got video footage of myself acting in plays, joking around. You know, so my wife was like, "Look, you seem quite happy there. You're always going about how miserable you were, but you seem." But for me, my memory of it anyway, my internal world was constantly, apart from a few brief periods, was constantly sort of in anguish, feeling like I couldn't get close to God.
And
Uh,
yet you stayed in
for 15
because you
years.
felt like this is the only way I'm going to be able to stay connected with God.
That's it. I thought if I leave this, I'm leaving God. And I did leave for 9 months. I did
Well,
fall away for 9 months.
there's the curse.
That's the curse. So for me, that was the strongest thing. I honestly think because the moment I realized it wasn't the only place, I was gone. Like pretty very, very quickly after that. So, but I know for a lot of other people I talk to, it isn't, that was me. I know for other people I've talked to, friends, that the community was really important.
Sure.
And, and the friendships and the purpose, and they got to know the Bible and all sorts of other things. But I would say for most people, that whole thing about getting to heaven, the one true church, this is where you can have this
A
is,
small thing about eternity, either
yeah,
being tortured or being
and
cared
just
for.
this is what God wants. I
Yeah.
think for most people that
Yeah.
was, and the purpose. But it wasn't like, oh, I can have a purpose. It was like we genuinely believed it. Like even for you, you're talking about purpose as if it's sort of
100%.
like a stuck on thing. It wasn't
100%.
something you genuinely believed. You basically genuinely believe the doctrine, surely. You and
Yes.
the thing that stopped you taking Tanya and yourself out of it. I mean, obviously Tanya's a free person; she could do what she wanted. But the thing that stopped you leaving at that point was you still basically believed the teachings and
Yes.
that this church,
Yes.
for all of Kip's faults, this
Yeah.
was the true church.
Yes.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
So here we go. Reason number one: specialness and exclusivity. Now, again, these are all cults.
Mm.
8 billion people living on the planet. People are searching for meaning and purpose. Boy, when you walk in our church, there was no question marks about, can I find purpose here? Can I find meaning here? That would be, you would be smacked in the face with that. I love the fact that with this specialness and exclusivity, they found something amazing with all of these people they surveyed, and that is there were many exceptionally brilliant people. And somewhere there's this idea that they talk about people that get brainwashed or that fall into a mind control or strongly controlled church, that they're not the top quality people or they're easily manipulated. They found, strangely enough, an incredibly large number of exceptional people. And it wasn't just people with low self esteem. So I think that's interesting. They called this specialness and exclusivity a prison of specialness. I kind of like that terminology. We thought we were special. God's only group. If we don't do it, how's it going to get done? We're the only ones. And that creates, according to them, a powerful cognitive dissonance for someone who is thinking about leaving the group. And I see that. I see that. Nothing evil. You want to be saved. You want to do right. You want to help others. You want to have meaning and purpose. But when it comes down to the exclusivity and we're the only ones that are right, now you got cognitive dissonance working on you. And I think it's hard to keep everything clear thinking. Any thoughts on that?
The two thoughts, the clear thinking one, isn't it? So what do you say? The cognitive dissonance is what there? It's we're special. Um, because cognitive dissonance is where you, for me, is when you've got two, you're kind of like you believe two things that are kind of that contradict each other. So what did
Yes, yes. I think the idea that I'm the only hope for everybody I ever come in contact with, that's working on you. It's because of this specialness, because of this exclusivity, I am going to say no to the family get together
right? So
because it's not as important. It's not this.
yeah,
I'm in a really special group. I don't think you get it. We're not just meeting together to sing kumbaya. We're the only people in this country that can help the millions be saved. Things have gone awry there.
well, so for me, where the cognitive dissonance might come in there is I am the church is theoretically teaching love, and but I'm going to neglect my family, like we talked about the Corban, for this church out of love. But if you actually thought about it, you're not really loving your family, but because there's this whole ideology, there's maybe some cognitive dissonance there. And obviously for me, there's with like stuff like hell and God being love, those are the things that I find hard to unite.
You might come to the point where you see that this movement is harmful to me. I
Right.
face it, I see it, I
Yeah.
acknowledge it. Now I got to work that beside. But my belief is that I'm special
Right.
because I'm the only God chose me
Right.
just to be one of the millions to find this. It clouds it. It just clouds it.
No, it definitely does. And we had this, that helps to understand what you're saying. And so two things came to mind. One was that whole thing about when we were in the church, we used to talk about don't get fuzzy about your doctrine, don't get
Right,
fuzzy about who's lost and who's saved. And
right,
it was like, yeah, because sometimes you would go, really, this lovely person. I was in
right.
Israel. There was a guy we were doing. We in the Jerusalem church. Uh, in order to get the license, it was important in Israel. If you get a license for your church, it gave you a lot more rights in Israel. And one of the important things to get a license was to do charity work. So there was this sort of special needs center, very severely disabled children and adults. And so they had, before I got there, they'd already been volunteering there and being involved and giving money to get this license. So I went there one day and it was quite full on intense work because there wasn't a huge amount of money, not a huge amount of resources. The children were kind of sleeping their own feces. You'd wash them off in the morning. And there was one guy working with the children there, a Muslim guy. And he was just an incredible guy, just devoted to these children. And one of the sort of more wealthy members of the Jerusalem church even offered to adopt this guy, this Muslim gentleman, and bring him back to the United States because he was just such an incredible man. And he refused to leave. He didn't want to leave these children. And I remember, and I talked to him and I said, and he was just like, when I look in their eyes, I see they need me. I could never abandon them. He was like one of the most loving men I've ever met. And in contrast, we, as soon as we got the license for the church, we basically stopped going there because we got the license. So we stopped helping. That might be unfair, but that's how I remember it. And so you could get into this thing. Well, how come is this person lost? And you're just walking down the street, the person who you buy your cup of tea from, they seem very nice. No, you've got to remember they're actually really evil and lost, and they're completely cut off from God. And given half a chance, they chop everyone's head off. It's like we had to believe that humanity was evil. And so and there was it was like, oh, if you're getting fuzzy in your doctrine. So that was one thing about that. And then the other thing I could relate to when you were talking about with a special group, sometimes you'd be on a date with a sister and another couple and you go, wow. And you were the only people in this restaurant who are saved, or you go to like Cambridge, a town outside of London, you go, wow, we're the only people in Cambridge who are saved, but also that feeling of, for me, the church in my mind was like an oasis of righteousness. It was like we were the one sort of righteous place on the earth. And I think when in 2003, when I realized we weren't, that was a bit of a blow. Even though I left very quickly, it wasn't a problem to move out of it. I remember there was a sense of like, oh, so the whole world is kind of just, it's all kind of crap, you know. And then I thought, well, then you can be, nothing's stopping you, Matthew, being the righteousness or eventually being love. There's nothing stopping you being the thing. Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world, and that's the challenge for all of us. You want the world, be the change, be the thing. So I think that was the beginning of me thinking, okay, I'm going to be love. I'm going to, it wasn't fully formed, but I do remember that sense of disappointment of the church just sort of being like everything else, government, politics, all the rest of the corrupt world. Yeah.
Interesting. And thanks for sharing those things. I'll just let that phrase ring before we go to the next reason that they saw why people would stay in a cult. The prison of specialness. We're from what we were taught, we were in the most special of any group in existence. That can make it really difficult to sort through the things that are unhealthy or reasons why I need to leave or should consider. Let's go to reason 2, the charisma of cult leaders. Plain and simple. That one's pretty self-evident. It's hard to start a cult if you don't have charisma, and it's hard to make it grow if you do not have charisma. I've heard you, Matthew, compliment regarding charisma. I've heard you compliment Doug Arthur a number of times, Chris McGrath. I'm trying to remember everybody I've heard you pretty readily hand out those compliments. Henry Crete, for sure, that's incredible charisma. And others, Kip McKean, let's be honest. So that's a really powerful thing. And that keeps people in sometimes even when they believe they would be healthier outside. The charisma of that leader and that leader's words. And they say that in the more extreme cults, not only does that leader have personal magnetism, but get this, oftentimes it's coupled with a visionary appeal where they might claim divine insights, or this is not about our church. Divine insights or revelations from higher powers or spiritual enlightenment. As far as I'm concerned, we were 10 out of 10 with that in our group. We gave those top leaders that. They took that. That's who they were. They did claim divine insights, revelations from higher powers, and spiritual enlightenment.
Do you think they claim revelations from high? What revelations do you think they claimed?
Well, you can start with Kip. I'm the one chosen God's modern day prophet is pretty high.
That's true.
That's pretty high.
That's true.
That's the highest it can get, unless you're going to say I am God. So I'm just saying, and we viewed them. This is what's so interesting. We made fun of denominationalism because they had in those old English churches those pulpits that were spiraling up 10 feet, 12 feet high. I preached from many of them. And we thought and preached how silly it was that those deceived denominational people actually thought that their preacher was up higher than they are, as in closer to heaven, as an intermediary between. We did that even more than the Church of England did, no matter where we stood to preach. And I think that kept people in. I think that keeps people in. Charisma. Let's go to this next one. Really interesting. This one caught me off guard. Wasn't expecting it. Spent more time on this one than all the rest. The reason why some people stay in cults, even though they know it's harmful, is for their sobriety and their health. You nodding your head in agreement. Give me your thoughts.
Well, I just know that I think there's people, including myself. I don't know how much this is a factor, but I definitely know that thing. People were drug addicts, alcoholics, um, very promiscuous, gambling problems, whatever. When they became part of our church, and this is probably true for other groups. I don't particularly like the word cult. I have to be honest, because um, I did a whole Edinburgh show about we're all in a cult. Everything could be regarded as a cult. But I accept there are particular qualities and kind of more intense cults and unhealthier cults.
I wouldn't push into using it.
But but I'm happy to use it as well. It doesn't really bother me too much. But but certainly they can help. So like like me being part of the group gave me a structure. So even though I had stopped taking drugs before I joined, it gave me something to do, purpose. My time was all filled up. And I know other people who come from quite maybe difficult situations. The church really helped to clean up their act. They stopped breaking the law. They stopped taking drugs. They stopped being promiscuous. They kind of got responsible. They got responsible with their money. So it really helped a lot of their life skills. And there's that fear that if you leave this, then you're going to go back to being a heroin addict or an alcoholic. And it's not impossible. I know people have gone back to that.
Sure.
I know people have gone. I certainly started smoking marijuana again after I left the church. I don't really smoke it much these days, but there's you can't. There is a possibility you get your freedom back, and you could go back to a way of life that actually was more damaging or equally damaging as being in a cult. So I think that really is. I mean, plus the church and cults do push this whole thing of be frightened, be frightened. The world's, that whole thing of people are evil out there, that, the world is scary and they're all out to get you and that it's not a safe place. And people are just, this is the safe place where people love God. But actually, there's some incredible, amazing people in the world. And the world is pretty much as safe or not safe as the church. I would say sometimes the church is less safe because people wear a mask, whereas in the world, people can also wear a mask, to be fair. It's pretty much, there's not much difference between the two for me. So um so the fear, but there's always a fear of like, if you leave the church, you're going to end up on the streets, bankrupt, a prostitute, a drug addict, that kind of fear that's put in people. And some people obviously do have a hard time when they leave. They really do, because it can be very hard to find your way when you've had a very structured and focused and
Yes.
purpose-driven thing. So it is difficult, you know.
The the thing that I appreciate about your words here and my thoughts in agreement, this is an area right here. Notice we're not trying to throw down this issue and push it aside as if it doesn't really matter. It does matter, and it's a very important matter. regarding sobriety, I will say that I've been to my share of AA and NA meetings as a sponsor and as a friend. And to this day, I think there's a whole lot that many churches could benefit by designing themselves more like these 12-step programs. I'm being totally honest. How you're treated, how the amount of love you're given, the accountability is there. There's no doubt, but you're signing up for it. The daily participation. I mean, it's phenomenal. I have family members who have refound their life through AA and NA. And so when I read this one, I thought, you know what? The church has probably helped a lot of people with this. And I don't want to just that. And everything that I've learned about AA or NA on how to break that the addiction, we did it in our church. It just seems to fit in perfectly. For instance, when they say you need to isolate yourself from your old friends, your old associates, you got to stay away from the people you used to see and the places you used to go. There's no better way to do that than get baptized. You'll notice that will change immediately. In fact, they will help you change it. This is your new friends now. We are your friends. And if you ever go there, one of us will go with you there. And on it would go. So that's almost like an A plus. We almost are like a witness protection program. You get in our group, you've got a whole new group of friends, brothers, sisters, friends, business associates, people that you hang out with. It really, and that can be stifling to some people, and that can be just what some people need to get healthy. And it says that also replacement of addictive substances with feelings of awe, and go to a highly disciplined lifestyle, and don't let people have too much free time on their hands. We were great at that. Like perfect. And then accountability, regular accountability. So I just want to say, and here's one thing we don't talk about enough. We both have addictive personalities. What we don't know is what would have been different in our lives had we never been a part of any of this with church, and what would have happened to us individual. We'll never know. We can only speculate. But I think about, I was in for 10 years, and yet I still wonder, had I never joined, how would my relationships be? Similar or different? My marriage, my relationships with my kids. That's a really big deal for me. Drugs and other addictions. I don't know. Financially, I don't know. So some of the things that we don't know are the powerful things that did not happen to us or with us from our own choices while we were in. I don't know. Does that ever come to your mind, or
Oh,
what's your?
definitely. I've even talked. I had a conversation with some friends, and we were talking about, and this person, this is very controversial. I've got to admit, this is controversial because, uh, I'm sort of an advocate of the ICOC sort of disbanding, at least as an institution. I believe relationships should be kept, but I'm basically saying the ICOC and the ICC as institutions probably shouldn't exist, or I certainly wouldn't be part of it. But we had this conversation with a couple of friends, and one of their friends was studying the Bible at the same time. They were both in the church. They both left the church, in the church, left. They had a friend who was studying the Bible at the same time with them, didn't become a Christian. And all three of when we were and this person's life then went in a particular direction that wasn't that great. And all three of us had that thought of, I wonder if it would have helped that person if they had got baptized at that time and been
Ah,
in the church for a while. So I can't, and I can, I think for my life, um, it definitely, uh, I mean, again, you never know what's going to happen otherwise, but I learned it was people have called it spiritual boot camp. The problem is a boot camp is normally only 6 weeks. I was in for 15 years. My analogy is it's more like a prison. I see the ICOC and those kind of very intense religious groups and cults as more like a prison. And the thing about prison is prison does help, can help people. People come off drugs in prison, people make new friends in prison, people learn skills in prison. Prison's got lots of, can be really helpful, but it's not somewhere you'd want to stay. It's not somewhere you want to go back to, and it's still prison. Um, and another analogy I have for me, and I have this generally with Christianity, but with the ICOC, it was it was kind of like a baptism. So, obviously we got baptized, but the actual ICOC experience itself was a baptism. That
Mm.
you and the idea of a baptism is you go through it and you come out the other side. You don't stay in the water. So I think the ICOC and religious groups like it, they certainly they have a place up till now. My goal would be that we learn what love is and love becomes the one true religion. That's my goal. But I think these groups are possibly even helping people to realize what's right and what's wrong, to get maybe a bit of discipline in their lives. I don't know, James. I'm now a bit, but I guess what am I saying? I'm saying definitely that it's not all negative. And I know other people, including my wife, would point at, even the discipling system. I was discipled by different people, uh, and some great people, and I learned things from them. And my wife felt the same way about certain people. And just going back to the charismatic leaders, there were some, even Bible discussion leaders. There were some incredible Bible discussion leaders, and they were charismatic, and they were giving, and they were witty, and they were good at games. There was a sort of hierarchy, and some of these guys were really impressive, and obviously the church kind of played up to that, so it was all a bit of an illusion. But I don't know. I'm rambling now. I'm not sure what I'm saying.
That's all right. Well, I'm going to close this out because it's been 32 minutes,
Okay.
but I want to do a part two on this, and I'm happy for us to record that immediately afterwards.
Okay. So should we end it
And
there?
but and speaking on behalf from the ICOC, may I just say, if you have to be in a prison, be a guard or a warden. So that if you said you were thinking of us as a prison, then maybe that's what the leaders were. We were the guards and the wardens.
Well, can I just say, I think to a degree we were all guards and wardens because we all took part in that culture to one degree
Yes,
or another because it was impossible. I think if you got baptized and you committed to it, you became a guard and a warder of yourself and even just a few people around you. But obviously, if you went to become a proper, an evangelist, if you had like areas of responsibility, you were essentially, yeah, you were the gatekeeper to heaven, and you were also the prison warder, and you were the enforcer. And I would
yes, of
say,
course.
I, but there's obviously when you leave that, there's a lot of guilt when you realize, oh
Right.
gosh, I was the, I was the guard. In that Stanford experiment, is it the Stanford
Yes.
experiment
Yes.
where the ones who took power and liked the power, but then
Ooh.
afterwards you've got to deal with that. I don't have that much to deal with on that because I never really got into the power thing. I definitely did abuse people and hurt people, but I was never super into power particularly, or maybe who knows? It's easy to be deceived. Maybe I am, but of a different kind.
I don't think so. Well, do you
Thanks,
want
Joe.
to just continue or do you want to hang up?
Are we still trying to keep them half an hour sessions?
Yeah.
Okay, let's hang up and then we'll do. I'll
Unless we
make another
get
cup of tea.
more people telling us go
We
for
have
another.
what one person saying. We had Sherry. Sherry was saying
That's not
enough.
enough. Yeah, welcome back for part two of why people stay in cults or high control groups. Great discussion last time, by the way. If anyone's not listened to the one previous to this, I thought that segment on the positive nature of a cult or a high control group regarding sobriety and health. I thought that was a very interesting discussion and I felt good about it. And I just want to say at this point that I received the comment that kind of melted my heart, that inspired me, that really boosted me. I just in the last couple of days from one of our other videos, from someone I've never met before. Her name is Judy Bolton. I'm assuming I can mention it because her comments were public. But what she said, and this was at the end of two big paragraphs, but the final sentence was, at last, this is so refreshing to actually hear the truth spoken with such discernment and respect. Favorite comment so far. And I'll tell you why. When she said at last, this is so refreshing, Matthew and I spent, I don't know how many months before we ever did one of these, talking about what were we hoping to accomplish, what were our goals. And we wanted to be refreshing. We want to be a refreshment. We know that that's needed right now. And for her to say this is so refreshing, that, number one, was a great boost for me personally. But then to say spoken with such discernment and respect, that was another one of our goals, is not to come off like, we want every past leader in this church hung up. We need one at a time go. None of that. We wanted to be honest. We talked so much about being honest and to have respect and show respect. And I feel like we've done that. And so, Judy, I just want to thank you for mentioning that because that really encouraged me. Any thought on that,
Well, I
Matthew?
know Judy and she's wonderful.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, yeah, I know Judy from the London church. She was in the London church. And so hello, Judy. And she's an amazing woman. Um,
She must have been in the South Zone because that's where most of the really, really good Christians were.
she might well have been, I can't remember where she was.
He might well
I
have
can't
been.
remember. And she was around for a while, so she might have moved. She might have been in the
Yes.
West. She might have been in a few places. And she was around for a while, Judy, and she's an amazing woman. And
Oh, I love that. I love that you know her.
and
And
I
so
and I
we're
just want,
going
yeah,
to,
go on.
go,
I wanted to
please.
say one thing, Jan. I just thought after our last conversation, because I once put a post up on the ex-members forum saying I'm really grateful to the ICOC. I've said a few different posts like this, but this one I think was about it taught me the difference between love and not love, or something, or it was something kind of positive, although kind of a slightly backhanded positive.
Yeah, sure.
But one person said they compared it to would you tell a concentration camp victim to be grateful for their experience, And first of all, I wasn't telling anybody else to be grateful. Uh, but secondly, I do appreciate what that person said because even though things have worked out for me, at least up to this point,
Sure.
um, uh, my friend killed himself. He's dead. Other people are still traumatized. Other people's marriages have been destroyed. Other people's careers have been destroyed. Other people's mental health has been destroyed. I mean, there's been a lot of pain, and I don't want to ever minimize. I still believe in a happy ending for everybody eventually, but that's my faith, that's my religion, and that includes the next life. But I just don't want to not acknowledge that for I don't know how many people, but definitely for some people, maybe a lot, maybe most, I don't know, their experience was very, very damaging. And for them, there might not be any redeeming qualities to it. And I know Kingdom kids can feel that way as well. Like they had no choice; they grew up in it. Um, so it's just I just want to acknowledge that it isn't necessarily positive for everybody. It can just be a purely negative experience that people feel is just like being abused, and that they don't have to find the positives in it. I just want to acknowledge that as much as I'm able. Yeah.
You say things like that, and you know what? Honestly, you sound like Jesus. So I'm with you 100%. Remember, yeah, thank you for that. So back to our reasons why people stay. The fourth one I have here is spirituality, buzz, or doctrines. And it basically says that the cults seek to create a strong sense of spirituality among their members. And they do this by using exclusive doctrine, superior teachings. We have the secret knowledge, the hidden truths, the direct revelations. Think about us with that one. Seriously. And also spiritual authority. The leaders are the sole authority. The leadership has divine wisdom. They claim special insights. that defines us. Again, this was not a survey of people that came from our church. And yet I find that pretty fascinating. And also, there's hyper disciplined learning usually with forced scripture studies, memorization of scriptures, etc. So, those are things that I think it's pretty easy to draw the line right there. I want to tell you that 2 days ago on Facebook, some guy I've never met on X members posted. I recently found the place I've been doing a Bible study with is a completely different church than what I was made to believe. The things they taught us were very much according to Scripture, at least at first, and I'm not sure, but it seems like maybe it's all not scriptural, and I found out more about the truth about the church's identity, and now I'm struggling because some places say it's a cult. But my head's a mess. Now, watch this last line. My head's a mess. I guess I'm scared because we were taught that they had the secrets of revelation. And without them, we would not obtain salvation. There it is. What keeps you in? What keeps you in? There's the spirituality, the buzz. We have the superior teachings. We have the secret knowledge. We have the hidden truth. You're the only one saved in this entire of your whole family tree. Thoughts?
So I don't. When I hear secrets of revelation, I don't think we ever did any. I remember hearing this. Yeah, you didn't figure out what it was to be a Christian. Do you remember that? That was like when people would be like, you didn't know what it was to be a Christian till you met us, till Kip showed you, till we showed you what it was to be a Christian, because you didn't figure out. You used to read the Bible and you'd go, oh, I can't. What? And but we showed you because we did the word study, the seeking God study, the discipleship study. So we showed you, and it was very powerful. That series of studies, and I'm sure Jehovah Witnesses have their thing, Mormons have their thing,
Sure.
other groups and religious organizations have their thing. Our thing was this: the God, the gospel, first principles, and it was a very, very powerful set of studies that takes you through the Bible and convinces you, oh, this is this is the teaching. And I never would have worked it out for myself. I never would have worked out, don't look at what a Christian is, look at what a disciple is. No, we thought, we had that sort of secret, the secret of how to be a real Christian, and
Right.
these are the verses, and the secret of baptism and the secret of repentance and all
It
that.
makes it hard to walk away, even if you think it might be helpful to walk away.
Well, I just have to say, Christianity in general, but particularly the ICOC doctrine, is very, very powerful and convincing. But so is Calvinism. I think people who are Calvinists really believe Calvinism is correct, and people who are Jehovah Witnesses really believe Jehovah Witness doctrine is correct, and Mormons really believe they've got it right. So I think it is. But we really believed, yeah, we've sussed this thing out. We've definitely got this down. We know what it is to, and even to this day, they still talk about themselves as disciple. Their disciple. They use that word, and there is like a sense of, and baptism's still incredibly important to them, you know.
Let's go to the last reason why people stay in cults: relationships and community. Relationships and community. I do remember Sherry, our friend from New York City, who I love and admire so much. After being in the church, I think 35 or 40 years, just a year ago, left. And when she was interviewed and asked, why did you stay in for so long? She said, friends. Like that was it. Friends. And I think that's very powerful. That's the community part. And I know we had different experiences, but this was a big one for me too, the friends. And yet there are people that said, were these your real friends, though? Were they? And that's a really interesting question because it seemed like, yeah, when you're in, they are. Now, when you're out, are you still their friend? If they were your friend when they reported to you as a leader, and then all of a sudden you're not the leader anymore. Are they still friends? Because I have a lot of evidence that says no. The thing on the friendship, it's a hard one for me because we're taught this is your spiritual family. This is your brothers and sisters. She is your mom now. And we bought into that. And so that makes it even harder to leave if all of your friends are now inside the group, right?
Yeah, I mean, I left in '95. I fell away, as we called it, and uh, I had no friends outside. I hadn't really been in touch with my old friends for like 7 years, 6, 7 years. A lot of them didn't want to know me. You know, I don't really blame them. It was, I mean, also the way I left that group, it was quite extreme, and I was a bit out of
That was the
control.
case with most of us.
But a couple did. Two particular friends were there for me in a really powerful way, and I'll never, you know, like I am. They never have to do anything for me for the rest of my life. But they are like they just came through in an incredible way. But so yeah, huge friendships. I think the worst, because I'm still friends with a lot of people. I think again the rank and file. I think the ordinary members, the friendships were more straightforward. Because there wasn't such a power dynamic. Like I've got friends, you've met some of them on the Zoom group and others. We were all just kind of the struggling Christians, you know, so we all kind of get on. And I think the more complicated relationships for me are the people who were above me in
Yeah.
the Lord, above me in the Lord. So the elders, the evangelists, who I did have friendships with. It wasn't like, you know, I was slightly privileged in that I had more friendship with them than I would say the ordinary member would have. But those relationships are more that they're not as, even to this day. I still try to be friends with them to a degree, and it's difficult because our relationship had a certain dynamic,
Right.
and it's even more difficult if they haven't really held their hands up and gone, that was all bullshit. If they go, that was all bullshit, it is quite easy then to. I have friends who were evangelists and have gone, it's all bullshit. And then it's quite easy to have a natural relationship with them. But the ones who still hold on to the bullshit, it's slightly more problematic. And there's obviously hurt and stuff. So I would say that for some of the leaders that had their relationships were heavily involved in that power dynamic, until both sides can kind of go, what were we doing? That was just bullshit. Hello, I'm John. I'm Peter. Nice to meet you. Do you know what I mean? To get rid of all that crap. But obviously, sometimes there's hurt involved. And, you know,
That hasn't happened very often from what I can tell.
I think the higher up you go, probably the less chance. I mean, I'm talking, my level is sort of lower level evangelists. The people I'm thinking of, they were sort of like first rung evangelists. They were never like the top guys, you know.
You know, when I did these eavesdropping, uh, that project with Steve Johnson a couple of years back, I said something about friendships in the church that I read through, and I kept this 2 paragraphs because it does sum up a lot of how I feel about friendships. And that is the church was a wonderful place to find a few incredible friends that would last a lifetime, including my wife. Same with you, including my wife of 42 years. The friendships, even those I found in eavesdropping, are really amazing. I could list them. There's more than a dozen, including you. The number of new friends, most of whom I've never even met in person, the depths of honesty of these new friendships is incredible. I love these people. The unit church itself that I was in, not so much. I now consider my past church as the original Christian mingle. maybe even tender, for spiritual attraction, spiritual love. And that cannot be all bad. So I just wanted to say that on the friendship side. My daughter wanted to add, who's majored in psychology, got her degree in psychology, that one reason people can't leave groups is what is called the sunk cost fallacy. And that's our tendency to follow through on an endeavor if we've already invested time and effort or money into it. And you want to follow through on that, whether or not the current costs outweigh the benefits. So I've already put time in it. I've already put my money in it. I've already put my effort in this. Should I leave? And they say that even works its way down to something as mundane as a movie, a boring movie, that if you paid for it and you drove and parked and went inside, you may know after 30 minutes you don't want this movie. It's not working. It's boring. It's no longer as exciting as you thought it was going to be. But will you get up and walk out? And I thought it was interesting that in the study that I read, age had an impact on how much time you're willing to continue watching the movie. And strangely, the younger people are more susceptible to the sunk cost. The older people will go, I'm out of here. I'm not going to watch any more of this. I don't even like it. Maybe a little bit younger, I'll hang in there. Maybe it will change. Maybe it'll get better. And maybe that's like the movie being our experience in the church. Hopes that it will get better. The plot will get better. I have a friend named Jan who lives in Concord, North Carolina, who's never been in a Church of Christ. She's been a Baptist all of her life. Great woman, godly woman, spiritual woman, giver, and I mean giver of money, time, her home. I can't say enough good things. She's helped my family out, like the family I was raised in. She's helped them out more than any other person in the world. And in Jan's Baptist Church, there were allegations that one of the youth ministers had been messing with sexually molesting boys, young boys in the church. He was the youth minister. Seemed like the evidence was there. I mean, they pressed charges. So he's got to go to court and find out, is he going to go to prison for years? And I was sitting talking to Jan about it before the trial started. And it didn't look good for him with the evidence we had all heard. And I said, Jan, do you believe Bobby is guilty of doing this? And she looked at me. I'll never forget her answer. I can't afford to believe that. It was one of the most honest responses that I've heard. It was like she knew. She knew. By the way, he was found guilty, went to prison. She knew, but she had put so much money in that church. She had spent all of her time. She volunteered for all special events. And when she said, I can't afford to believe that, I just thought that was a beautiful place where I connected with her, and my respect for her took a new leap. And I think there's many people in the church that we were in and in the ICC right now that when they're asked, do you believe these things about how the church, what it's about, what KIPP's about, what leadership's about, what the patterns of hidden sin have been from the beginning, do you believe it? I think you're doing great if you can get to where Jan was and at least say, I just can't afford to believe that. It's going to be so devastating if it's true, because there's some honesty in their comment. That's what I got on that, my friend. Closing words?
I suppose I was thinking about why don't people leave? I I think a lot of it is fear. there is sunk cost. I know people who have issues, huge issues with the leadership in their church. They're almost at war with them, and and
but
there's
still there.
still there in us in the ICOC, not the ICC, because this wouldn't work. But they're kind of at war. There's a stalemate because the leaders can't kick them out because they don't have that kind of power anymore.
Right.
And but they can't. The non-leaders who are fighting the leaders can't get rid of the leaders because so it's kind of like a stalemate. And part of the reason the non-leaders stay is why should we go? We've invested in this church. We're going to
Mm,
stay. And I respect that. These are people I'm friends with and I know. And I respect their attitude. And some of them are just like, I think they feel called by God to stay and hold the church accountable. But I would say for a lot of people, it's hard to say because a lot of people have been there for years. It is their friendship. Yeah, I can't even say because I think with the ICC it's clearer. The ICC, I don't think anyone stay. I think you can't really stay in the ICC. Like in the ICOC these days, you can be a pew warmer. You can just turn up. You can treat it like a normal
sure.
church. Um,
I might not give money. I might show up, but I'm not
yeah,
going to give.
yeah, and I might not come to all the meetings. Like they kind of, I don't know about all ICOC churches, but a lot of
Yeah.
ICOC churches that I know of, they're sort of more like normal churches, like people to come and go, which kind of is. There's another side to that we should talk about, which is like, well, what was the point? The whole point of the ICOC was we were going to be different from all those other churches, and now we've ended up being the same, and that's called a victory. There's like you haven't solved the problem, just gone round in a big circle. But the ICC probably can't do that. I think I kind of hope for people when I look about people going. See, I would say keep the if you have to go to the church to keep the friendships, there's a problem. There's
Yes.
a problem with that. You should
Yes.
be able to quite happily leave that church,
Yes.
and any friendships you've got, you should be
Are
able to
there for
happily
life.
take with you because we can Zoom with them, you can talk to them, you can meet up and go to the movies. You do not need to go to the 3 meetings a week and give your contribution to be friends with these people. You can keep your community. But if your community is based on something other than love, then yes, then you will probably will lose it. But that means, well, was it really worth keeping? Because what is it based on? So that for me is why I would say that, you know, I would say to everybody in the ICOC, at least take a year out and stop going to meetings because and explore your options. Um, because I think there's a like it's ridiculous. I mean, you go to church. There is I've watched a lot. You've watched a lot of the sermons. I've watched a lot of the sermons, both ICC, ICOC, old school, new school, the more liberal ones, even the most liberal ones. They've got nothing new to say. They just slightly water it down, but there's nothing new. They talk about values and community a bit more and what are our values and but they can't break out, they can't break free of the ICOC doctrine. They're stuck in it. Even the liberal, like I'm sorry to say names, but like Thames Valley, the East region in London, they're like the most liberal parts of the church. There's no real you're still stuck. You just got a lukewarm version of what you had before, or possibly a Church of Christ version of what was there before. And I would say be a bit braver, like really dig, really question, because I think there is gold, there is oil to be struck, but you have to be brave. And I'm not saying I'm the bravest person. I just think I can't. I don't know. I just think I look at the ICOC. You're stuck. You're totally stuck. You're totally stuck as a church.
Mm.
The only way it's ever going to change, individuals need to strike out and be brave. Yeah.
You know what's amazing? Thanks for sharing that. We've never discussed that. When I was a young minister, the
Mm.
verses we always used about all these churches we went to was we were like pouring new wine into these old wineskins, these old churches. And you know what? They couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle it. Church split up. So we have to start our own churches because we have the new wine and we got to have new wineskins to teach. So we're going to start from scratch all over the world. What you just said is all the old preachers now, that's the old wine.
It is.
That's the old wine. And it's not accepting the new wine very well.
And
Isn't
even,
that interesting?
and even the young preachers, because like in the East, they've got a young guy who was baptized after 2003. He's a nice guy. This isn't
Sure.
about him, but he's so deep in the ICOC culture, he can't even see it. Like I said to one of the girls, one of the sisters who I'm still friends with on Facebook, do you ever get a non-ICOC preacher in? And she said, yes, this guy. And the guy she talked about was baptized in the New York church. He worked in the ministry in the New York ICOC, and then now he's got a non-denominational church in Potomac Valley, or whatever, which is basically like, it's rubbish, man. You haven't it, and the crazy thing is, they've got more in common now. The ICOC in London has more in common with the Church of England and the evangelicals than it does with Kip's group, with the ICC. They have more in common with the Church of England evangelical than they do with the ICC, Kip's group.
Well,
It's
just
like
just
that's
just count
cognitive
on
dissonance.
this.
Yeah.
Just count on this. Brother Michael's going to have that clip from this showing on the advertisements for why you should be going to his church instead of that traditional ICOC in London. He's going to be showing that clip.